I'm Vivian Sisskin. I'm a clinical professor at the University of Maryland. And I'm also owner of the Sisskin Stuttering Center in McLean, Virginia. And we see people in the Washington, D.C. area. First thing I want to say is, no, I'm not a person who stutters, but I've been working for more than 4 decades with people who stutter, and I've learned most of what I know about stuttering from people who stutter. I'm going to talk today a little bit about struggle. I'm going to demystify the notion of struggle, and people can figure out what that is and what part of the stuttering pattern it is, and also provide some ways to maybe reduce struggling if people want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so you can see my PowerPoint and get it up there. Okay, so you see my email address is there. You can email me questions if they're not answered during the talk. I'm very happy to take any email questions you'd like. I also put my email address in Slack, so that's my status is the email address. So I'm going to start out by just talking a little bit about what I was asked to do today. So I was asked to talk about avoidance reduction therapy, ARTS, which is the kind of therapy I do mostly with group therapy. 45 minutes to talk about avoidance reduction therapy for stuttering, not enough time. So I decided to take a slice out of ARTS and talk about struggle. For many of you, you're going to think that it's a very simple talk, especially if you've heard me talk about ARTS before. This is going to be very, very basic. And the reason is because we're at the Friends Convention. And we're here talking about children, families, and I'm talking to parents, talking to speech language pathologists who work with children and have children in their families, and also to adults who stutter who may be mentoring young children who stutter. There's a misnomer out there that ARTS is not for children, it's for adolescents and adults who stutter. But the truth of the matter is that so many of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about related to ARTS we do with young children. And so what today's presentation is meant to do is to bring it down to a level where you can explain struggle to children so they can understand more about the way they're talking and to decide and make choices about the way they're talking. So let's start out, and we're going to talk about struggle. My talk today is going to be in 2 parts. The first part is going to be about demystifying struggle, what is struggle, and the second part is going to be about what you can do about it. So my hope today, again, is that you'll be able to explain struggle to children, and when you're giving advice, because most people give advice, children get advice from family members, from friends, from other people who stutter, that you can give some advice that does not contribute to struggle, but helps reduce struggle. So we're going to talk about escape from the moment of stuttering. We're going to talk about avoiding speaking and stuttering. We're going to talk about the anxiety about worrying about stuttering or anticipating stuttering throughout the day. Some people say when they go to bed, when they wake up throughout the entire day, and exhaustion and worry about the whole thing. So let's first talk about the things you do to get out of stuttering, these escape behaviors. So some of these escape behaviors are things you do at the moment of stuttering to get out of them. Some of them are learned on your own. Some of them are advice people give you. And yes, actually, some of them are things that speech language pathologists have recommended that you do. For example, you get to a word that you can't say, you switch it out and try another one, word substitution, or maybe a tongue click or a hand snap or a foot movement. Those are the physical ones that you might do. Closing your eyes at the moment of stuttering. I'm not sure you can see with my glasses on, but I say my name is Vivian. If I close my eyes, I can escape the moment of stuttering. I can restart my sentences, and that helps me get out of a moment of stuttering too. I can pause right when I'm about to get stuck. That's a timing device that allows me to escape from the moment of stuttering. Sometimes facial grimaces. I can even inhale or exhale and get out of a moment of stuttering, or talk around a word that I can't say. And yes, even a block is a way of escaping from the moment of stuttering because it's a way of holding back and not moving forward. tensing up and locking up the vocal folds one way or another. So these kinds of things are things that, again, you might develop very early on because you're trying to get from point A to point B quickly, and you find out that they work, or they might be suggestions that other people have given you. And in fact, you might think that they're helpful, and at times they are helpful, but there's a problem with them. And the problem is that they don't last. Anything new works, so they all work. Anything new and novel will help you escape the moment of stuttering, but they become habits. And they make your speech highly inefficient, tense, uncomfortable, and also distracting. You might ask, how do they become attached to your speech pattern? How do you develop a whole pattern of struggle behaviors? Well, it's a thing called conditioning. And if you've ever trained a dog to sit or train a dog to do anything, you might say sit, give the dog a treat, and then the dog sits down. The next time you have a treat, the dog's going to sit down because he's anticipating that he's going to be getting something pleasurable. Well, what happens is that people who stutter find escaping the moment of stuttering very pleasurable. And so anything that allows you to escape will be reinforced and becomes attached onto the speech pattern. So watch me. I'm going to get stuck up. I'm going to say today we're at the Friends conference, okay? So if I say we're at the Friends conference, that helped me get out of it. That was loss of eye contact, but it stops working. We're at the Friends conference. I added an Now I'm talking this way. We're at the Friends we're at the Friends conference. I have to start over, and pretty soon these things start piling up. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And that's the problem. It's called an intermittent reinforcement schedule. And if you know anything about intermittent reinforcement schedules, you know that they make the behavior very, very strong. And this process is called operant conditioning. And so we become, our patterns become the things we've tried to escape from stuttering. Struggle also are things that you do to avoid speaking. And these involve identity or self-stigma. And these help you avoid speaking, stuttering, or being identified as a person who stutters. So you might only say the things that you can say. You might order only the food that you can say at that moment. You might let others speak to you. You might pretend to, what did you say something to me? Pretend to be distracted, pretend to think. Giving up and saying, never mind, only saying the minimum, only saying what it's important. Pretending you don't know, not answering the question in class, even though you know it and someone answers it for you. Deciding you are shy. Maybe you are shy, maybe you're not, but maybe rationalizing that someone who's shy doesn't go to the party. Someone who's shy doesn't lead in a conversation. Someone who's shy may not tell a joke in a group. Asking others to present your work for you. Or what about acting goofy, or acting confident, or acting snobby, or taking on a foreign accent? All these things give you some false fluency, and they help you avoid, but they contribute to your struggle, and ultimately not showing up. And we're talking today, the conference name, showing up. Not showing up is the ultimate of ways to suppress stuttering and hide. So while those escape behaviors and avoidance behaviors the avoidance behaviors allow you to eliminate the risk of escape, they have a big hit on social interaction and self-esteem. They make you less confident, less connected in conversation, certainly less social, and you're not showing your potential. And I guess the bottom line is you're not showing the real you. And I'm really a smart guy. I'm really a fun person. I have a great sense of humor. People ultimately don't know the real you because of all the escape and avoidance. And sometimes that doesn't feel so good. So let's talk about the feelings. Struggle also comes from suppression of feelings. And we're looking at a theme here of suppression. So suppression of feelings, not wanting to feel certain things. So I don't want to feel shame. And when I stutter, I feel shameful. I feel less in front of my peers. or I'm feeling embarrassed or awkward or frustrated or different. Not wanting to feel those things contributes to the struggle because it contributes to suppression of stuttering. So your mind starts to race ahead and starts to scan around for ways that you can actually prevent feeling those feelings alone. So let's talk about what's in our head. The thoughts also are things that you don't want to think. So I don't want to participate. I don't want to speak. I don't want to stutter because others, they may not like me, or I think I'm wasting their time. They won't want to hire me. That person won't want to date me. I'll never get that job. They'll think I'm incompetent. I can't do whatever. And so those I can't do are the thoughts that run through your head. So struggle, from my perspective, is not only escape from the moment of stuttering, it's also escaping from speaking, escaping from situations, and escaping from feeling feelings and thinking thoughts. So what happens? You have what we call mental gymnastics. And these are the things that go through the person's head all day long, sometimes at night, sometimes when they're lying awake thinking, sometimes before a presentation, sometimes before going to class, before an introduction. And these add to the exhaustion and struggle. The person eventually becomes a walking museum of all of the things that they've tried to hide their stuttering. And also all the things that they've tried not to feel those feelings and not to think those thoughts. And sometimes, you know, as someone who looks at people who stutter all the time, I can actually look at the person and see all the junk in their house and the history of all the things that they've tried to escape and to hide and avoid. You can't always see the feelings and thoughts. Those are underneath the iceberg, but they're there and they're important and they drive the avoidance and they drive the actual speech pattern. So how is struggle different from disfluency? You might ask that. This is a new word, disfluency. You might not have heard that before, but I think that I'm going to differentiate that from struggle at this point. So stuttering is the main idea here. We're talking about people stuttering, but it's made up of two things. It's made up of disfluency, you see in blue, and struggle, you see in red. So what is that disfluency? It's breaks in fluency. Repetition, prolongation, maybe some of those things that need to be there because of neurological or genetic factors that Eric and Nan talked about earlier. We also know that it's highly variable and that sometimes you'll have a day where there's very little frequency of disfluency and a day where it seems like every word is sticky. And that variability is something that is always around with disfluency. On the other hand, we'll look at struggle. That's the learned reactivity that we just talked about and efforts to suppress and control. So let me talk a little bit about the word control. Many people try to control their stuttering. They feel proud that they have it under control. But what do you think about when you think about the word control? You think about suppression. You think about effort. You think about conflict. That is struggle in itself. So from my perspective, control is one of my 7-letter dirty words. I have a few other ones, but I think that if we change that word to something like choice, it gets rid of some of that suppression idea. So let's look at that last one, that variable frequency. I want to talk a little bit about frequency now. The value of fluency. So let's talk about how much I stutter. Or people who say 98% fluency, 50% fluency, only had one disfluency. How important is how often we stutter? Right now, I'm going to put a lot of disfluency in my speech. Again, I'm not a person who stutters, but I'm going to put some disfluency in my speech, some prolongation and some repetition. But I'm going to still continue to talk to you and connect with you. and I'm going to say everything that I want to say, and I'm going to be disfluent. This isn't changing how I feel about the conversation. It's not having any impact on my life. And believe me, I'm doing a lot of stuttering right now. My frequency was very high. However, if I don't have any disfluency when I'm talking, and all of a sudden I have just one, I have just, I have just one disfluency, that frequency is very, very low, but that sort of interrupted the connection we were having in our conversation. And so it interrupted the flow. So counting disfluencies are really not as important as how you're stuttering. It's more important to look at the quality of disfluency and whether or not it's struggled. So valuing disfluency can get you in trouble. There's a paradox there, because the more you strive for fluency, the more you're going to be disfluent. And I know that many of you have tried that. And when the days that it's the most important, or the moment it's the most important, during that introduction or during that public speaking event, you want to be fluent, and that's the moment that you struggle. So fluency is a fair weather friend. As you see on the bottom there, it's never there when you need it, always there when you don't. And so I think that being able to lessen the value of that fluency and look at your struggle instead can be very, very helpful. So at this point, we're going to take a little break, and I'm going to talk the next section a little bit about what you can do to change that, how you can reduce struggle. But I want you to know in the meantime that it's okay to stutter and it's okay to struggle. You don't have to change the way you talk. Struggling actually is one of the ways to get out of struggling. You have to struggle your way out of struggling. And so I'm going to talk about that next. So I'm going to stop my PowerPoint at this point and go back and maybe take a couple of questions.
You must be very clear, because there's surprisingly little questions. We will give people a minute, and then we'll continue if we need to.
Okay, I see one for circumlocution though. A circumlocution is when you know the word that you're going to say, it's right there, but you talk all the way around it until you're ready and the fear dies down, and then you say it. It's sort of like circling the wagon until the fear is down. So explaining to a parent who wants fluency and just doesn't understand that's the goal. I think that many people want fluency because they don't know the options. You might ask the parent, if the child were fluent, what will the child be able to do that they can't do now? And if they say present in class, or if they say they would have more friends, or they'd have more confidence, all those things can come while you are disfluent, but reduce struggle. So I don't think that it's incompatible. I think that their desire for fluency is really just saying their desire for less life impact for their child. Ways to curb the helpers. We're going to talk about that next. We're going to get that. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the blocks next, and yeah, that's coming next. Should I just get going on the next part? What do you think? All right. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to reduce it. I'm starting this off with a quote from my mentor, Joe Sheehan. You may not have a choice as to whether or not you stutter, but you do have a choice as to how you stutter. So let's talk about some of those choices. And now we're going to be looking at, instead of controlling your stuttering, we're going to be looking at choice. We're going to start with some general principles about what to consider when reducing struggle. And then, believe it or not, being in COVID mode for so long, I've been cooking a lot. And I've seen more recipes or looked up more recipes in the last few months than I have in my entire life. So I decided to make a recipe for reducing struggle for those of you who would like a recipe. These recipes can be fun to follow. So let's start out with the first principle. Guiding principle number 1, reduce escape and avoidance behavior. So the idea is that your stuttering won't hurt you and your fluency won't help you. So the idea is take your head out of the sand and start facing it and looking at it. And we're going to be showing you how to do that in just a second. And the message here is to stutter openly and honestly. The second guiding principle is to reduce emotional reactivity. So it's okay to feel whatever you feel, and it's okay to think whatever you think. You're wasting someone's time or feeling awkward. Because reducing emotional reactivity is actually driving the avoidance behavior. You begin to react to the moment of stuttering, and then you begin to escape. So give yourself permission to feel feelings and give others permission to think what they think. The next guiding principle is reducing false role behavior. So what is false role behavior? Okay, pretending to be someone you're not is a false role. If you stutter and you pretend to be someone who's fluent, that's a false role. And as soon as you show your stuttering, you have what we call role conflict. And without getting into too much detail there, it's all about pride and identity. This whole principle here is to value and take pride in your unique way of talking. You can see the guy opening up and self-disclosing, advertising stuttering, or standing out as having a speech that's a little bit different. As Mae West always said, I'd rather be looked over than overlooked. Anybody who knows Mae West is way much older than me. Okay, so here, be authentic, be yourself, be a leader when you choose to be. Say all you want when you want, and stutter. Okay, so we're going to get into what you do now, the recipe. The recipe is all about stuttering well, or you can say rocking your stuttering, or reducing struggle if you want to. So the idea is that you're going to prepare this recipe 2 or 3 times a day, not more than that, because you don't want to overeat. And if you try to do it too many times during the day, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Okay, so talk the way you normally talk. But if you really want to reduce struggle, try some of this a couple times during the day. Here are the ingredients. Okay, first ingredient is observation. Pay attention to your talking, but do this only when you plan to do it. Okay, keep that ingredient in mind. The next ingredient is open stuttering. And that's where you put the disfluency where it belongs. Now, at this conference, I hear a lot of people talking about open stuttering, where they're showing their stuttering and being open about being a person who stutters. But in this particular context, under the arts concept of open stuttering, it is a very, very specific meaning, which I'm going to get to in the next slide. But open stuttering usually means that you're not using one of those escape behaviors. You're actually stuttering on the word you fear without a trick. And the third ingredient is courage. Courage to lose control. Wow, if you're trying to control your stuttering all the time and you're afraid of loss of control, can you imagine having the courage to let go and lose control? That takes a lot of risk taking. So that courage is both you're losing control, willingness to lose control, and also to take some risks. Note on the bottom, there are no tools or techniques required. We're not giving you additional tools or techniques or strategies to do. We're actually taking away the things that you've learned that lead to your struggle. So this is all about less, not doing more. So what are you going to prepare in advance? Okay, you're going to prepare some things in advance in this recipe. One, you're going to identify some opportunities. Opportunities are those low feared people or situations. It might be a friend. It might be a parent. It might be your speech pathologist. These are people who you feel okay showing your stuttering to. You might feel okay taking some risks with. And so those are the people you're going to do this with. You might say right now, but I don't care about them. I'm worried about those high fear situations where I have to meet someone or talk in front of class. The idea of doing this in low feared situations is pretty soon the people in the mid feared category will come down to be low feared. The people in the high feared category will come down to be mid feared and eventually low feared. So we're always working in the low feared situations. We're not trying to do this in very scary situations. I always say to my clients, don't be a hero. Don't try to do it in some place where it's really high stakes and this fear is really high. Now you're going to make 3 lists. Very important. List number 1, things that you do to escape or avoid. Those were the things that I showed you in those first slides with all of those exclamation points. All the things you do to escape stuttering and all the things you do to avoid stuttering. List number 2, all the things you don't want to feel, the shame, awkward, avoidance, frustration, anything for you that you don't want to feel. And list number 3, the things that you don't want other people to think. He'll think I'm stupid. He won't want to hire me. She won't want to date me. They're wasting my time. I'm wasting their time. And these lists have to be your lists personally to you. So you can't generalize and say anybody's list is somebody else's list. These are your personal lists that make up your unique stuttering pattern. All right, the procedure. Here comes the procedure. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is what we call monitor. And that's a fancy word for paying attention. So you're going to pick something from list number 1. It might be loss of eye contact. It might be starting over. It might be using an It might be an open mouth position. It could be anything that you do that helps you escape from the moment of stuttering. And you enter a low feared situation and you observe when you do it. It's that simple. Just did it. Just did it. And remember, you're going to pick when you do this 2 or 3 times a day, and that's it. That's the monitoring. That's the first thing you do. Repeat this often, because if you repeat it for often, what's going to happen is you're going to be surprised and you're going to start open stuttering. Because if you don't use that trick or avoidance behavior, you're going to actually stutter on the word that you fear, which is hugely scary. However, this is good because that's what open stuttering is. It's stuttering without the escape behavior. You're putting the stutter where it belongs. So right now, if you hear me say, my name is Vivian, Vivian was fluent. But I repeated is many times before it as a stall because I needed to wait for the fear to die down so I could say Vivian. When you're open stuttering, you're saying, my name is Vivian. You're getting right to it, openly and honestly. This is scary though, so you're going to plan to experience list 2 and list 3. And so those have to be always available for you to experience. Embrace them, accept them, and understand that those are feelings and thoughts that are okay to be there. Then you're going to let go of control. This is the hard part. You're going to add open stuttering now intentionally. You're going to add additional items from list 2 and 3, those thoughts and feelings, and you're going to smother it with courage. And if you forgot what courage is, it's losing control and taking risks, okay? And that's really what it's all about. You're going to continue the above until reactivity is reduced and disfluency is comfortable. It takes some time and you have to have patience. In sum, basically, successful suppression or hiding of stuttering maintains and perpetuates it. Celebrate and count your successes, because at the beginning, you may not be able to open stutter right away. You may revert back to those tricks. They're habits you've been practicing for a long, long time. But if you do it even one time, count it as a success and move to the next one, maybe 2 successes the next day. It's okay to stutter. And right now it's okay to struggle. You have to struggle to reduce struggle. The first time you open Stutter, it may not be comfortable and forward moving. It may be disfluent. It may be rough because you're fighting it. That was what you wanted to hide. So that's okay because you intentionally are saying, you're stuttering where you want to stutter on the feared word. You may block before you can open Stutter. This just means you're holding back. If you have been the kind of person who stutters, who was covert and never showed stuttering before, and you decide not to substitute a word, you may start out blocking because, oh my goodness, here I go, and you hold back. That's fine. The next step is to see if you can get some sound in that block. And that's pretty scary to hear sound in your block because you're used to hearing nothing. So that would be the next step. Somebody was asking a question before about getting sound in blocks, and we can talk about that when I answer questions. Certainly when you're not sure what to do the thing you fear, but not in the high feared situations right away. When struggle is reduced, communication is efficient, it's comfortable, confident, and it's disfluent. Acceptance and change are compatible. Okay, are there more questions now?
I don't think that we answered the question, a couple of the questions that were already listed about the negative thoughts. What are your thoughts? How do you get to stop negative thoughts from happening? Because sometimes they feel automatic.
Yeah, they are automatic. And the idea is that we don't want to stop any thoughts from happening. We want to allow them to be there. And I think that you can give people permission to think those things. If your thought is, he'll think I'm stupid, that's a thought that you can have. Whether or not, you don't know what the other person is thinking. It could be true, it may be not true. The idea is acting on that is not necessarily helping you reduce struggle. So, of course, one of the reasons that you've developed a lot of these escape behaviors is because you've been guided by potential thoughts and the feelings that they evoke. The idea now is that we're going to allow them in and not react to them with escape and avoidance. You can have the same feeling or thought and decide to stutter on the sound or decide to escape from the sound. One will lead you to more efficient and comfortable stuttering. The other one will keep you struggling. Somebody mentioned, you mentioned that blocks are part of the struggle. How do I get my child to let their stutter out? Yeah. The idea is that you can't get anybody to do it. You can't, and if somebody doesn't want to show it, they're not ready to show it. But the idea is that getting sound in blocks is something they can do in a very protective environment. So maybe with you. I usually have a cognitive message that goes along it for kids. And sometimes it's, let's play with it, play around with the stuttering moment. So I say stay and play. So if they get blocked, let's see if we can make it uglier. Let's see if we can put a lot of sound in it, fill it with sound. And so the idea of playing around with the stuttering moment can be helpful, but they have to do this in a very safe environment with someone that they want to play around with their stuttering with. Sometimes it may not be the parent. I'm seeing more questions come in. Talking about reprogramming your automatic thoughts. I think we use a lot of CBT in our ACT in our therapy. So we do I can't do all of that right now in 45 minutes. I'm just talking about struggle today, but I don't think that we necessarily need to reprogram. I think we need to allow thoughts to be there, and it's sort of like meditative state where you can see the thoughts and allow them to pass and understand that those automatic thoughts lead you to what we call sometimes stop signs. So you have an automatic thought, I can't do that, because he'll think I'm stupid, or they'll all look at me, or I'll feel awkward. And being able to recognize the automatic thoughts are creating stop signs for you. And then you can have a personal challenge that you're going to run a stop sign. And even though you're stopped and you feel like you can't go further, a real success, a real risk is to run the stop sign and do it anyway. Kind of exciting. We make it exciting anyway. Let's see. Okay, somebody asked about identifying the components of the speech mechanism. I think that if children are interested in understanding how to do something in terms of getting sound in the block, for example, understanding that they're shutting off their voice when they're blocking, they have to understand what a larynx is, and they have to understand certain things. And so those are important. The most important thing in reducing struggle, though, is not to put a child in a mirror or record them so they can see their own tricks. And I think this is really important. A lot of speech pathologists ask me this: would you do a videotape and have them look at it? No child wants to look at their stuttering and analyze it, nor do any adults that I know. I don't want to look at my speech and analyze it either. I think the idea is that proprioception, and if anybody knows what that means, it's the sensory information that we get from our muscles and joints. Being able to identify it when you're doing it is much more valuable. And so I think that sometimes I'll say to a child, there's something that you're doing with your lips, you know, I can't figure it out. Can you figure it out, what you're doing with your lips at the moment that you stutter? Let's say they're pressing their lips together, and they go, no, I can't think, there's something there. And so they'll come back a week or two later and say, I know what you're talking about. I press my lips together. Wow, you do. Hey, let's see if we can watch for that. So having the child discover it and having the child discover it through proprioception, I feel are the most valuable ways to get them to identify those things at first, rather than you pointing them out to them. Let's see. Oh, I love the question, pseudo-stuttering. Okay, so somebody asked me about pseudo-stuttering or voluntary stuttering, and I love to talk about that. So in the concept of arts, voluntary stuttering is a little bit different than it might be in other places. So most people know when you stutter on purpose or you voluntary stutter, it brings down the fear and you automatically have more fluency. That's not a secret. And so it temporarily gives you more fluency. Some people say, isn't that a good way to desensitize to stuttering so that you'd be more apt to open stutter? I don't know. I don't think it does that. For people who are covert, I think the fear is losing control, not controlling your stuttering. When you're voluntary stuttering, you have control over it, and it's not evoking the same fear you have when you lose control. And so for me, voluntary stuttering is very important, but it's very important more from an identity perspective. And so instead of voluntary stuttering when you struggle a lot, voluntary stutter when you don't, to show yourself as the person who stutters when you don't have to. That's the identity piece. And so in the concept of arts, voluntary stuttering is very important to give up fluency, if that makes any sense, so that you can show yourself as a person who stutters and reinforce that identity. If you really want to desensitize, you've got to do the thing you fear in small doses. Meditation to reach the mindful state. I think that if you are inclined to meditate, meditation can actually help you. I think that if you, we were talking in one of my groups recently, and instead of talking about speech assignments to do at various times during the day, the group decided that they were going to talk about it being meditative moments. And those are moments where they were going to allow the feelings and allow the thoughts to be there and sit with them and let them pass. And somebody said, I can never meditate because I can't stop the thoughts. I'm not a very good meditator. And somebody else said, me too, but the idea is allow the thoughts to be there, and even if you can't get rid of them, that's part of learning to meditate. So I recommend it for people who resonate with that. However, I wouldn't teach it to someone or encourage someone to do it if they don't resonate it. There are many roads to Rome, and you can reduce struggle in a variety of ways. And the idea is to reach the child or the adult in terms of things that they relate to and things that they want to do and things that make sense for them. Anything wrong with wanting as many options or choices when it comes to managing our stutter? As a covert, it's nice to have choices, always looking. Okay, the reason I like that question is because it mentions managing stuttering. And I think that if we stop trying to manage it, it's the same as stopping to, managing and suppression are the same to me. I'm sorry if a lot of people promote managing, but I don't think there's anything wrong with stuttering, and there's nothing to manage. It's not out of control. It is what it is. It's a product of the learned behaviors. And so I think that it's nothing to fix, it's nothing to manage, it's nothing to control. And it's something that you shouldn't suppress. And so I rather have ideas about choosing the way you want to stutter and making choices to stutter differently if you choose to, ways that lead to less struggle rather than managing, controlling, or suppressing it.